Hi everybody, welcome to the IOC class. I want to thank Jerry Wagner for inviting me here. And today we have what I believe to be a really important topic. And the title of the presentation today is The Surprising Influence of Generations in Our Society and in the Workplace. Aristotle said that generations are shaped by history, and then history is shaped by generations. Now this is a topic that's been around a very long time, since Aristotle. But it wasn't until Auguste Comte, the French philosopher, that really started to delineate the understandings of generations and put it in kind of a context, as it were. And then Karl Mannheim, later, who was a Hungarian sociologist, really focused on defining further generations. And the modern day thinkers of generations are Bill Strauss and Neil Howe. They together have written over 8 best-selling books on generations. They actually coined the term millennials, so you millennials could thank Strauss and Howe for that. I have the distinct privilege of working with Neil Howe on a regular basis. He is my business colleague in our Generations Consulting business, and a real pleasure to work with him. Now, the first thing I want to do is really help you think about what a generation is, right? We've got to start from scratch. We've got to figure out what is a generation. Now, the definition of a generation is a birth year group whose length is about 18 to 22 years, roughly the span of a phase of life. And there's 3 distinct characteristics that a generation have. Number 1, each generation shares a common age location in history. So what does that mean? Well, if you were between the ages of 15 and 25 during the Summer of Love in 1969, when all that cultural upheaval was going on, you were a baby boomer. Oh boy, were you a baby boomer, right? And you had certain attitudes and traits at that time that were shaped by all the things that were going on at that time around you, economically and socially and otherwise. Now, if you were the parents of someone that was between 15 and 25, you had a very different viewpoint. Same history you were experiencing, but you were kind of going crazy if you were a parent at that time. These crazy baby boomers with all their wild ideas, right? So that's an example of a period of time, an age cohort in a certain period of time, right? The second thing about generations is that they share common attitudes, behaviors, and traits, right? So because they had similar experiences growing up, they tend to feel the same about many things. So this is very apparent in much of the political statistics that's out there. I'll give you a perfect example. This whole notion of same-sex marriage. 74% of millennials actually support same-sex marriage, while only 38%, less than half of baby boomers, say they support same-sex marriage. This is very much of a generational issue. The third thing about generations you should know is that generations have a collective identity. When you ask someone what generation they are, they typically know that, right? There's a self-identification with their own generation. So those 3 things combine to kind of explain what a generation is. Now, there's one truism I will add about generations that are important to know, because this really has influence, particularly in the workplace. Since the beginning of time, every existing generation views incoming generations negatively. They never live up to expectations. Okay, the silent generation, their parents said children should be seen and not heard. The parents of baby boomers, what did they say when the boomers were growing up with all that crazy long hair, right? They thought the world was going to come to an end. Now, the millennials today, everybody says they're lazy, entitled, connected to their technology to the extent that's damaging, and so forth and so on. This is a narrative that's very typical. This is never going to go away. Whoever the incoming generation is that's coming in is going to be viewed negatively. George Orwell, you probably know him from the book 1984, but he actually was a great student of this topic of generations, and he had a great quote, and he said, "Every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it, and wiser than the one that came after it." Now, I'm going to show you this cartoon because it's a perfect example of one of the points I'm trying to make. The title of the cartoon, of course, says High School Sweethearts and the Big Step. And a couple in the 1950s, let's get married first. In the 1970s, let's get stoned first. And in the 1990s, let's get tested first. Okay, these are same age bracket, same age group, different points in history and very different attitudes depending on the kind of experiences that were going on at that time. So you might be asking, well, why do generations matter? Who cares? Well, generations have a profound effect, as Aristotle said, on history, on society, on our culture, on everything. And in the workplace, well, we've done some research, and the last survey we did on this was fairly remarkable. Almost 3/4, 72% of all the employees that we surveyed said, yes, generations cause problems in the workplace and pose challenges. That is what I would say would be a challenge and a problem. Well, why is this? Well, as I mentioned, all these traits and behaviors that every generation carries with them, kind of their baggage, their traits and behavior baggage comes with them and comes to the workplace. And the workplace is the one place where you have multiple generations all working in one place in very close proximity. And this is of course, this is going to cause conflict in the workplace. Okay, so we're going to take a break now, but I'm going to give you a little assignment. There's two things I want you to do. Number one, I want you to ask yourself what generation you think you are and talk to the class about that. And the second thing is, I want you to think of 2 or 3 historical things that have happened in your lifetime at your coming of age stage, say between the ages that you remember between 5 and 20 or so forth, the historical events that happened during that time that you believe shaped your generation. So go ahead and do that, and we'll come back and talk about baby boomers. Hey, welcome back, everybody. So now I want to talk about the baby boomers, and this is actually a really interesting, a very interesting generation, and one that I like talking about a lot. And what I notice when I do presentations that the people that love to hear most about the baby boomers are themselves. I'll just put that out there. The baby boomers were born between 1943 and 1960. So if you're born in that age group, you're a baby boomer. About 54 to 71 years old. Of course, you know many of the famous boomers: Oprah Winfrey, Steve Jobs, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Bill Gates, so forth and so on. So what is the baby boomer story? Like, what's their coming of age experience? Well, they came of age after World War II and before the early 70s. And during that time, the GDP tripled. The economy was doing quite well. Eisenhower had built all these highways, suburbia was growing, and these were the little kids of the suburbs, right? They grew up at a time of increased materialism, and when they started to turn in their teenagers and early 20s, they started to rebel against all that. And what do rebels do? They want to change everything. They want to dress differently. They want to talk differently. They think about things differently. This is the generation that was the Great Rebellion generation that had very bad experiences with the federal government, was very much down on the government with Nixon in power at that time. It was very much of a kind of a rebellious spirit. If you remember back then, you boomers, there was buttons that many of the boomers wore that said, don't trust anyone under 30, or question authority, and so forth and so on. And this is a very integral part about the kind of the psyche of the baby boomer. Now, I'm going to talk about 4 distinct characteristics of baby boomers, and I'm incorporating some Madison Avenue and some Hollywood to make this a little entertaining. I have commercials and movie clips to help exemplify my points. The first one is change agent. I'm not going to play this video right now. This is Dennis Hopper doing a bank commercial, and we're going to come back and talk about it.
To withdraw, to go away, to disappear. That's how the dictionary defines retirement. Time to redefine. Your generation is definitely not headed for bingo night. In fact, you could write a book about how you're going to turn retirement upside down.
The best book on retirement is the one you'll write, The Dream Book. Your Ameriprise financial advisor can help you get it started and help you get to a retirement defined by your dreams.
Because I just don't see you playing shuffleboard, you know what I mean?
So, 20, 30 years ago, someone that age, however Dennis Hopper old he was when he did that commercial, probably in his 60s, 20 or 30 years ago, you wouldn't have someone looking like that, right? Boomers will never age. and they never want to age. They are forever young. That's part of their ethic and their ethos. But they're change agents. I mean, look at the guy. He's in the desert, and he's just like, I want to change everything. And it's all about mission, and it's all about this kind of inner self. And change agents is a very, very important part of the ethic of a baby boomer. The second characteristic of baby boomers is that baby boomers have always been the focus of attention. Ever since they were born, they were the baby boomers, right? So the Census Department named them the baby boomers because all the parents that came back from World War II, they went to the suburbs, they had a lot of kids, those kids were baby boomers, so there was a lot of media attention on them. Of course, when the late teens and early 20s, they were very much involved in the counterculture movement, and then they got to the workplace, and oh my God, the baby boomers are in the workplace, and then they turned 40, and everybody freaked out because they turned 40. And then they turned 60 and started to retire, and everybody started talking about them, and soon they're going to be dying, and everybody's still going to be talking about them. So that's the nature of the baby boomers. They have always been the focus of attention, at least in the media. The third thing about baby boomers to know, and this really points a lot, I think, to the first point, is that they very naturally challenge rules and authority. Back to that button, question authority, right? That's very much of a boomer thing. In the workplace, everybody should be happy for one thing that boomers did. They were responsible for Casual Friday. They introduced the casual dress. Okay, before then, it was the guys, you wore the dark suits and the red ties and the white shirts. It was kind of the IBM look. Boomers came along, they came to the workplace and they looked around and they said, I don't think we need to wear these suits anymore. So you could thank the boomers for that. But this notion of, I'm not going to listen to the rules, I'm going to go my own way. Boomers tend to have a fierce sense of independence in the kinds of things that they do, and that's very much the something that they kind of own. The fourth thing and the last thing about boomers is they're work focused. They are into the mission of work. Baby boomers invented the Casual Friday, but they also invented this notion of workaholism, and no one works harder than boomers. Now, you millennials and Xers out there, if you ever go to work on time and you get there on time at 9 and you leave on time at 5:30 and a boomer looks at you funny, that's because he comes there early, he stays late. It's more about attaching yourself to the work and your mission. One thing to realize about boomers is that they do everything big. So when they got to the workplace, they did work big, and work is very much the central part of their lives. That's not the case with the other generations that we're going to be talking about. All right, so we're going to take a little break, but during this break, I want you to do a little bit of an exercise. I want you to think about those themes that I talked about, that fierce independence, change agents, work-focused, mission-focused, challenging rules. What are your thoughts about the best ways to engage these baby boomers in the workplace? So think about that, and I'll meet you on the other side. Well, welcome back. Now I want to talk about my favorite generation because I'm in this generation. This is Generation X. These are people born between the years of 1961 and 1981. They're 33 to 53 years old, roughly in that age group. Now, what were Generation X's coming of age experience? Well, completely different than baby boomers. While the economy was growing during the baby boomers coming of age, the economy was tanking during Generation X's age. Generation X, the stuff that was going on then, as kids they were known as latchkey kids. They were the ignored generation, the great unwanted generation. Birth rates were actually at an all-time low at that time, and crime rates were at an all-time high. Risk factors for kids like teenage pregnancies, abortions, drinking while driving, not wearing a seatbelt. These were actually at historic highs during the times that the Generation X was coming of age. And this was their kind of survivalist generational experience. Marijuana use, cigarette use, alcohol use, again, all at historic highs as youth with Generation X. Now, there's four main characteristics that I'm going to talk about with Generation X, and the first I kind of alluded to. It's the great ignored generation. and I brought in a movie that I think you should have seen before at any age that you are. I'm going to play a clip right now, and we're going to talk about the ignored generation.
Mom! Dad!
We stopped them!
Where are you going? Where are you going? We're gonna miss the plane! Did you count heads?
11, including me. 5 boys, 6 girls, 4 parents, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Did we miss the plane?
No, you just made it.
Welcome aboard Flight 1275 to Paris, France.
I have a terrible feeling
So which house you want to hit first, huh?
About what?
that we didn't do something.
Crowbars up.
Now you feel that way because we left in such a hurry.
Do we set the timers on the lights?
Mm-hmm.
Did you lock up?
Yeah,
Did you close the garage?
that's it. I forgot to close the garage, that's it.
No, that's not it.
What else can we be forgetting?
Home Alone.
This is my house. I have to defend it. Yes!
Starring Macaulay Culkin,
Up here, you morons! Come and get me!
Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern,
Somebody pick up.
Catherine O'Hara, John Hurd,
Do you speak English?
and John Candy.
I got a feeling this is going to be your best Christmas ever.
Home Alone, a new comedy from John Hughes, directed by Chris Columbus.
You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
Coming this Christmas.
So that is an awesome movie. Macaulay Culkin, by the way, is a Generation Xer, and that whole notion of leaving a kid behind and going to a trip, it's something that was, that was very much of what Hollywood was doing at that time. In fact, Neil Howe and I went back, and we looked at all the movies that involved kids between, like, the time that the Generation X was growing up. And we came up with about 18 films, from Rosemary's Baby to Children of the Corn. This was the evil child era of Hollywood, and this is the experience of Generation X. Now, the second theme kind of relates to that, and it's the Generation X are survivors. So because they've kind of been left to fend for themselves as kids, they turned pretty much like survivalists. This whole, I don't know, remember the show on television, Fear Factor, but that is very much of an Xer thing, right? Now I'm going to show you a little clip of a Mountain Dew commercial, which I think you'll really enjoy, that very much typifies Generation X. Here you go.
In these shark-infested waters, a team of scientists and one brave volunteer are about to find the answer to an important question. Is Diet Mountain Dew as much of a thrill as regular dew? The results were clear. Diet Mountain Dew is all the dew with none of the calories.
By the way, when that commercial was done, I don't think there was any CGI. But that was like, yeah, sure, of course, go for it, right? Mountain Dew. Very much of an Xer experience, and that is very much of the survival experience. By the way, today, Generation X is responsible for the largest percentage of entrepreneurs in the United States. These are risk takers. This is the Sergey Brins and the Larry Pages and the Jeff Bezoses. These are the guys that are really driving entrepreneurism in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. Very much of entrepreneurial generation. The third thing about Generation X, which is really important to know, and it's a subtle but important distinction from baby boomers. Remember we talked about how baby boomers were stick it to the man, and they want to break the rules. Generation X just wants to avoid the rules. It's said that baby boomers want to change the world, and Xers just want to change the channel, right? Now, I have a clip from Hollywood, and if you're an Xer, you will know this movie. It's actually a cult classic, Office Space. I'm going to play a clip to demonstrate rule avoidance. Here we go.
From Mike Judge, creator of Beavis and Butthead and co-creator of King of the Hill, comes a movie about people who go to work. Who are part of a team.
And remember, next Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day.
Okay, if I could set the building on fire.
Who respect their boss.
We need to talk about your flare.
Well, I have 15 pieces on.
15 is the minimum. Brian, for example, has 37 pieces of flare on today. And a terrific smile.
And need to escape.
I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm gonna go anymore.
One of these days, I just kick this piece of...
I'm thinking now it might be more fun to just get fired. And I've always wondered what that would take.
Oh, Peter, listen.
Well, it looks like you've been missing quite a bit of work lately.
Well, I wouldn't say I've been missing it, Bob.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
We're going to be getting rid of these people here. Mr. Samir. Okay. Not going to work here anymore anyway.
You haven't been showing up and you got to keep your job.
Actually, I'm being promoted.
Thank you, Bob.
This is a suck.
They're gonna throw you out on the street so that Bill Lumberg's stock will go up. It's completely unfair. Initech deserves to go down. We're just the guys to do it. Tell me about that virus you're always talking about. The one that could rip off the company for a bunch of money. I'm not going to do anything illegal, Peter. Illegal? Samir, this is America. The worst they're gonna do is they put you in a white-collar minimum security resort for a couple of months. You know they have conjugal visits there?
I might be showing her my O face.
Oh. They let you have sex with women?
They sure do. Okay, I'll do it.
Office Space.
I know you've been getting pretty depressed about your job and everything, and so I just wanted to tell you, good things can happen in this world. I mean, look at me.
I love that movie. It really is it's just the perfect movie for a Generation Xer. If you haven't seen it, you got to go out and see it. So the fourth and last characteristic of Generation X is pragmatic, right? Whereas the boomers are always kind of seeking a higher ground and a higher mission, Xers are saying, where do I get my next dinner, right? How do I approach this problem practically? And this plays out in Xers' lives, this plays out in the workplace, but pragmatic is very much a part of their experience. UCLA does a survey every year. They've been doing it since 1967, and there's two questions they ask. They ask a lot of questions, but the two questions that they do ask are: is it more important that you have a meaningful philosophy of life, or that you're more financially well off? And Xers completely reversed that trend from boomers. They're all about being financially well off. When I graduated from college in 1984, Ronald Reagan was president. All my friends went off to New York to get their MBA degrees to kind of make it happen. Community service was not the thing back then, not like you see in millennials today, right? So very different experience. So how can that not affect you? How can that different in experience not affect you in later life? And this is the nature of generations. Now, I want to show you a clip of a commercial of a company that I'm sure you've heard of. It's a shoe company who perfectly captured, and we did consulting for them when they were designing this, actually, captured the ethic of Generation X. So watch this commercial.
At this time, I'm the only one working. I was told to quit. Coaches never noticed me. That was just my motivation. To work harder than everyone else. While you were sleeping, I've already done 150 suicides. Run 3 miles. My game might not be perfect. It's a work in progress. But for every shot I make out here, it's another reason to fear me on the court. What you don't see is the hours of dedication I put in every single day of my life. What makes me is not what happens in a game, rather when no one is around. This is not a choice. This is a way of life. So just remember, when you're sleeping, I'm out here working every day to be one step ahead of everyone else.
So Generation X, see what I'm saying is, or I think what you're starting to get a feel for, there are real differences with generations in their coming of age experience and how they see the world, you know, what their worldview is. Now, we do know that Generation X, as tough as they had it for kids, they're making pretty good parents. This is the generation that actually introduced work-life balance in the workplace, right? That flexible work schedule. They are the helicopter parents. They are the what we call jet fighter parents of the millennial kids, right? They make sure that their kids get what they need. So they're very focused on family. They're focused on work as well, but they tend to compartmentalize things, right? Work is just kind of a means to an end. You work to live, but ideally the perfect scenario for an Xer is to be a free agent. Now we're going to take a break, but I want to do a little exercise just like I did with boomers with Xers. Now that you know a little bit about Xers, think about them in the workplace. What's the best way to engage members of Generation X in the workplace? So think about that, and I'll meet you on the other end. All right, this is the generation you all have been waiting for, the millennials. This is the second most talked about, and probably the first most talked about in the media generation, since they're kind of the newest generation on the scene. The millennial were born between 1982 and 2004, roughly 10 to 32 years old. Mark Zuckerberg, Macklemore, Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber. These are some of the kind of the iconic figures of the millennial generation. Now let me just talk a little bit about some demographic information on the millennials. So the U.S. population, as you know, probably is a little over 300 million, and millennials represent about 32 to 33% of that, about 100 million people. It is currently the largest generation in U.S. history, and it is actually the largest generation ever in U.S. history, actually bigger than the baby boomers were when they were growing up. They're the most ethnically diverse generation in U.S. history. I heard an amazing statistic the other day. If you take every 85-year-old in the United States and you line them up on stage, 5% are non-white. They come down stage, and then you put up everyone who's 5 years old and under, and you line them up, 52% are non-white. Millennials are leading the charge for multi-ethnicity and diversity. That is the generation that is making that happen. And that's a one-way ticket. That's not coming back. So welcome to the new America. This is the millennial generation. The other thing about millennials that are important to know is they are the most educated generation in U.S. history. Almost 39% of millennials over 25 have four-year college degrees. This compares to 17% for baby boomers in 1974, a remarkable increase in college enrollment and test scores. The last thing, a point that I want to make about millennials, and I'm going to get a little into their specific characteristics, is that they're known to have the lowest risk behaviors on record since CDC has been tracking this stuff over 30 or 40 years. So wearing a seatbelt, drinking while driving, unwanted pregnancies, abortion rates have dropped almost 70% from Xers to millennials. Unwanted pregnancies have dropped over 50% from Xers to millennials. This is a generation that is behaviorally very different and very risk adverse from the other generations. Okay, so what's their life experience? Well, very different from boomers, very different from Xers. They had their own life experience. This was a generation of increased parental involvement. This is when the children of the corn went away and 3 Men and a Baby came in. This was a generation that was the first generation in a minivan. Minivans didn't exist before the millennials, right? Chrysler said, let's create a vehicle that could just strap them in a million ways, and that's exactly what they did. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, sitting in the back seat as a young kid, and my mom was driving, my dad would look back and say, if your mom gets in an accident, just do this, right? That's not happening with the millennials, right? This is a very safety culture generation. About 4 years after the minivans came, the little sign on the back of the minivan that said baby on board, you remember those? That was about the millennials. This was a generation that grew up with Barney, the dinosaur, who told them all to get along and cooperate and work together and work as teams. And indeed, Teamwork is an essential element of the millennials. And also, finally, this is a generation that it has been very dependent and is kind of one with technology. Technology is an extension of themselves. They are a truly digitally native generation. Some statistics, trends of high school and college age youth in the last 15 years. Unstructured free play in hours per week is down. Sleep is down. They sleep less. Age at which career choices are made is down. Temp work for pay, hours per week, is down. Well, what's up? Homework is up. Intent to go to four-year college is up. Admission standards are up. Tuition and debt relative to family income is up. First job via internship is up as well. Some of the different characteristics of millennials. Now, I'm going to talk about 5 characteristics of millennials now, because they're special. They get 5, the other ones get 4. And the first characteristic is special. Now, this is a special generation, and this is not all negative. The reality is that they were raised to feel special by their parents. And it is remarkable, and we found this out when we were doing consulting for K through 3. The young kids, the little millennials that were entering grade school, they came with their parents. And then they attach their parents to everything they do. And you know, if you're a parent of a millennial, it's a busy schedule. It's soccer practice, it's violin practice, it's, going to the tutor. It's all about that focusing on you. And it's a generation that has really been focused on, particularly by their parents. Most parents admit that they spend more time with their kids than they spent with their parents when they were their kids' age. A survey done recently suggests that getting along with parents, 82% of teens report absolutely no problems with any family member, which is a remarkably high number. That compares to 75% in 1983 and only 48% in 1974 when the boomers were growing up. A lot of dissonance between parents and kids, not the case with millennials that we're really seeing right now. In the workplace, kids and parents are very much one with each other. 4%, in a recent survey, I found that 4% of parents are going with their kids on job interviews. It happens. We always advocate just treat it like, judo. Just let it happen. It's going to happen. You can't stonewall the parents. Just let it happen and actually work with the parents to make sure that it's the best outcome for their child. The second characteristic about millennials is sheltered. We talked a little bit about the buckle in and the straps and so forth, and all the, there was 16 different child protection rules that came out since 1982, the Amber Laws and the Megan Alerts and so forth and so on, a whole bunch of those, and I'll show you a slide on that. Now, I do want to show you a little commercial that Subaru did that is very different than you would see, for example, Mustang doing several years ago, and this is a perfect example of the sheltered millennial. So why don't you take a look at the commercial?
So your seat good? Get the mirrors all adjusted, you can see everything okay? Just stay off the freeways, all right? I don't want you going out on those yet. Just leave your phone in your purse, I don't want you texting.
Daddy, okay?
Okay, there you go. Be careful.
Thanks, Dad.
Call me, but not while you're driving. We knew this day was coming. That's why we bought a Subaru.
The third out of the 5 characteristics of millennials is confident. This is a really confident generation, and this often gets confused from entitled. This is a generation that went to school and their teachers and their parents said, you could do anything you want to do, right? And a lot of empowerment was kind of put in their hands, and this developed a sense of confidence in everything that they do. I'm going to show you a little clip. We found this on YouTube. It was the perfect clip and exemplification of confidence. So take a listen.
Look me in the eye. It's okay if you're scared. So am I. But we're scared for different reasons. I'm scared of what I won't become. And you're scared of what I could become. Look at me. I won't let myself end where I started. I won't let myself finish where I began. I know what is within me, even if you can't see it yet. Look me in the eyes. I have something more important than courage. I have patience. I will become what I know I am.
Fourth out of the 5 characteristics is team-oriented. Now, we've talked about this a little before. It started when they were kids with Barney telling them to work together to come up with solutions. And then when they got to work, there was an increase of group projects, kind of group grading, as it were, with their peers. And even in the workplace today, it's amazing. I talk to companies that become so much more successful when they actually focus their goals on and get a team of millennials involved at solving problems. We do consulting work for MTV, and they do something called a hackathon. When they want to solve a really sticky, hairy, complex problem, they get a room, they start at midnight, they get pizza and beer, and the millennials are responsible for at 6 a.m. for coming up with that solution. So when you think about millennials and lazy, not so much. If you create the right environment and a team environment with a mission behind it, then they probably will do pretty well. The last, the 5 out of the 5th characteristics of millennials is achievers. Now, this makes a lot of sense. We talked a lot about achievement in school, the highest graduation rates and so forth and so on, confidence in career goals and so forth. This is a very, very strong achieving generation. And there is one slide that I have to show you that I'm going to show you right now. Okay, these are the winning words in the National Spelling Bee. 1950, 1970, 1980, and as you can see, 2003 through 2013. I don't even know what those words are. But as you can see, the achievement of millennials has really gotten to a new level. The last thing I want to mention that wasn't on the original list that is very important to mention about millennials, this is a generation that is really into volunteering and giving back. This is a very socially conscious generation. Out of the 10 top workplaces to work, 4 out of the top 10 are either nonprofits or government agencies. I think NSA, believe it or not, with all this controversy going on around NSA getting in people's lives, was the 11th or 12th of the number of the companies that millennials would want to work for. Now in 2001, and I'll show you this slide, in 2001 it was the typical IBM and BMW and Cisco and Microsoft and so forth. It's really changed. Right now, Teach for America gets more applications than Princeton University. So this is a very important element to think about and know about millennials. All right, so we're going to take a break, and then after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about all the generations in the workplace and the best way to optimize these generations working together. Okay, so we've learned about generations, you've learned about the traits of each of the generations, you've learned a little bit about generations in the workplace. And in these remaining 2 minutes, I just want to leave you with really 3 things that I believe are keys to optimizing intergenerational work environments. Very simply, it's measure, teach, and recognize. Let me explain. Measure. Now, I believe you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And if you don't have an understanding of what the engagement level is in your organization at the generational level, okay, a lot of companies do satisfaction surveys, a lot of companies do engagement surveys. That's good, you should keep doing that. But one of the things you should think about is cutting the data so you can measure it by generation. Some cultures are very boomer focused, very mission focused, and they're alienating the Xers. Some cultures are very, very fast driving and entrepreneurial risk taking, and they're alienating the boomers, right? So understanding engagement levels by generation is very important. So that was the first one, measure. Teach. Now, we have a one-day workshop that we do for companies, and it's basically just reviewing the basics of what a generation is, kind of like the stuff that we talked about in the last few minutes, but getting people to understand where people are coming from. We always say that if you want to really understand someone, you got to meet them where they are, right? Generations is just another form of diversity, right? When you think about race, when you think about gender, when you think about all the differences that exist within an individual, generations is a component of that. So understanding where somebody's coming from a generational perspective is very important. And you could just do that through workshops and training. The final thing is recognize the diversity, that diversity means strength. And I don't know if you guys have used Gallup Strength Finder out there, but it's a fabulous tool. There's other tools out there. But really understanding the nuances of the individuals, not just the elements of diversity, but what their strengths are and how they lead and how they manage and how they sell and how they operate and do the things that they do. Understanding each person for what they are and integrating all those strengths and all that stuff, including generations, is going to really take you far organizationally. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on generations. Take care, everybody. Bye.